Hey, this is Dave Specter with Fret 12's Blues and Beyond, and we're here at Buddy Guy's Legends in Chicago this afternoon with Tom Marker, host of WXRT's Blues Breakers radio show, one of the main blues radio shows in Chicago. I've been listening to it for over 20 years. It's actually pretty difficult to find blues on the radio in Chicago.
Yeah.
In terms of major stations, XRT is really the only station that has a blues show.
Yeah. Most cities that have blues shows have better public radio, have more public radio options. You know, we have really one major public radio station, so they do a lot of news and talk.
Right.
And a lot of times if you go to a city that has a lot more blues on the radio, it's because they have more than one public radio station. So that's where you usually find it.
Right. And so you took over Blues Breakers in '84, and had you been you're not from Chicago, are you, Tom?
Not originally. I've always had family here, and I grew up in Michigan nearby, so we made visits here often. It was always the city I wanted to move to because it was so cool when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But I listened to some blues in high school. I have memorable moments when some people turned me on to some blues records. I remember, I think I was in 10th grade in high school, and I was seated next to a senior, and I was talking to him about music, and he said, "Oh, you got to get this album by the Butterfield Blues Band called East West." And I did, and it just kind of blew my mind. It was so far beyond anything I'd ever heard.
Right, with Mike Bloomfield on guitar.
Well, that was terrific. But you know, I was not as much a blues fan. I was not as close. I like the blues a lot now, and I have less interest in other music. It's shifting over the years that way.
I see.
But I was always a bit of a blues fan, at least. And then in '84, I had this trip that I went to Memphis and New Orleans for the Jazz Fest, and I came back all re-inspired with the blues interest, and just as the guy who was doing the blues show was about to leave the station, so I walked right into it that way.
Right. And back in the '80s in Chicago, you could still hear Muddy. He passed away, in '81?
Passed away in the early '80s.
Yeah.
But I was working at XRT since 1980, and they always had blues as part of their regular programming.
Right.
And I worked in Elgin, a suburb of Chicago, for about 5 years before that, and we played blues on that station. Muddy used to be around all the time. There was a place called Harry Hope's in Cary, Illinois, and in the 70s, in those days and earlier, as I understand, artists wouldn't do just one night. They would come to a club and they'd do 5 days in a row. They'd do Wednesday, and then Thursday to be in the papers, and there'd be a little more interest, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday matinee. And he used to play Harry Hope's in Cary 4 or 5 nights at a time, a few times a year. So there was a lot of muddy waters out in the northwest suburbs of Chicago in the 70s.
Did you get to meet Muddy, spend any time with him?
I met him a number of times, and I didn't really spend a lot of up close and personal time with him, but we'd go backstage, and there was a nice dressing room, and he always had champagne back there, you know, and
champagne and
reefer, and Pine Top Perkins would be there, and hang out with him.
One of Muddy's famous songs from one of his Johnny Winter produced records, Champagne and Reefer.
A song that came out right about that time.
Yeah.
And Bob Margolin was part of his band at that time, and I remember him being too friendly with my wife at one night, but I could understand that.
Yeah, one of my great regrets is never being able to see Muddy. Passed away right when I was seriously getting into blues. Can you talk about his presence and
his
sound?
show, you know, at that time that was right about the time that he was doing the albums that were produced by Johnny Winter on Blue Sky Records. So he was having a rebirth, and he was just terrific. And he had that great band, like I say, Pine Top Perkins and Bob Margolin, and he had Willie Big Eyes Smith on drums. And he would always sit on a stool. And the high point of the show was when he picked up the guitar, because he didn't always have his guitar. Usually Bob Margolin was playing the guitar, but when Muddy picked up his guitar and did that stuff, that was terrific. And when he was having a really good night, you could tell the better nights he was off the stool more often than he was on. And some nights he was pretty much on the stool. But he was full of life and charming and exciting and rocking.
Yeah. That's great. You also got a chance to meet and interview Stevie Ray Vaughan, I understand.
I did. Well, I met him a couple of times. One time I interviewed him, and that was when he was pretty new on the scene, and I had no idea he was coming into my radio show. And it wasn't a very good interview, but it was. We had a good time. And then I remember another occasion when I was backstage at Alpine Valley. That's the big outdoor music theater in Wisconsin, where eventually that was the last place that he played.
Right.
This was another occasion when he was there, but. There were some people that were invited backstage. They'd won a contest or something, so they were taking pictures with him. And just a sign of the kind of person he was so patient with them and so friendly toward them. He was taking pictures of them. He was trying to help them work out the camera. He spent as much time as he had with them, maybe even a little more.
Right.
And then he'd go out on stage and it sounded like 3 guitars out there, you know. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that I noticed about the blues scene in Chicago very early on. Is just the humility and the down-to-earth nature of a vast majority of the musicians, even the living legends. They'll just, sit and talk with you like you're an old friend a lot.
Absolutely. It's just a great bunch of people that run the blues clubs and the music clubs and are the performers and the fans.
Yeah. Now, for those of you who've listened to XRT, and you can listen to Tom's show if you're not in Chicago, at WXRT.com is the website, Tom?
Yeah. 93XRT.com. It's on part of CBS. It's on AOL. But really, if you just went to 93XRT.com, that would be the direct way of getting to it.
Right, and your show's on Monday nights?
Show's on Monday nights, 9 to 10 p.m. Central Time.
Right. So. And for those of you who listen to the station, you often hear Buddy Guy's voice doing station IDs, in addition to him being a regular part of your rotation, I know. And I know you've had a lot of experience with your friend Buddy.
Yeah.
Live interviews, live performances.
Yeah.
Could you talk about some Buddy Guy stories for us?
Buddy's been just a great friend to the station, and we first really connected just about the time he opened this club and about the time he had the album Damn Right I Got the Blues. That kind of came around about the same time, and that was a little over 20 years ago now. But he was always very generous with his time, coming over to the station and spending an hour at a time, and telling stories and playing records, playing songs, and we've established a friendship over the years. Just because I'm always here almost like a stalker, I'm here so much when Buddy's playing. But Buddy's always, if he's in town, he's always at the bar, at least for a couple hours every evening, saying hi to people and talking to people. That would include me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've had the opportunity a lot during the January shows to go upstairs to the so-called green room, and back in the day it was just it would be Buddy and me and a couple of old men up there, and he would tell some stories that were almost embarrassing just to listen to about life in the old days. And now it's a little more upscale up there, the crowd.
Yeah.
And we don't get the good stories quite as often.
Right.
But
I remember a good story he told during an interview I heard with you and him on the radio, where he was talking about Big Mama Thornton being on tour with her in Europe. Those Great American Folk Blues Fest DVDs, which are out now, have footage of Buddy and Big Mama Thornton and T-Bone Walker and Junior Wells and Muddy and Wolf playing in Europe in the 60s. And you asked Buddy about Big Mama Thornton maybe having a crush on him.
She was after him, you know. And he had to hide in John Lee Hooker's bedroom and sleep on the floor just so that she wouldn't know where he was. But they'd get up in the morning, walk out to the hotel, and she'd find him. She'd find him there. She was chasing him down.
Yeah, and I remember when you asked him, I think you said, well, didn't Big Mama Thornton interest you, Buddy? Weren't you into her? And his answer was priceless. Do you remember what he said?
No, I don't remember.
He goes, Big Mama Thornton, there's too much meat for my refrigerator.
Now, see, his last album, he has Tom Hambridge produced his last album and co-wrote a lot of songs with Buddy.
Yeah.
And Tom, according to what he says, is he would just follow Buddy around, and Buddy would say stuff like that all day, and he'd write it down and turn it into a song.
Yeah,
That's what.
I'm sorry.
That's why that last album was so good. There was
Yeah.
all these Buddy-isms in all the songs.
Right.
But Buddy's just such a terrific guitar player too, and I remember seeing him at a benefit concert once. It was a local concert with some out-of-town people who were paying tribute to an artist who had recently passed away. So there were a lot of different acts that would come out on stage, one after another after another. But when Buddy's just one of those guys. When he comes out and he hits that one note, you know it's Buddy.
Yeah.
How? I don't understand that, but he can hit one note and it sounds better than everything that's happened before all evening.
Yeah.
And you instantly know it's him.
I wanted to ask you about some other Chicago blues guitar players. I know you've got some stories about people like Carl Weathersby and Lurie Bell and Luther Allison.
You know, Lurie Bell is one of those guys when for a while he was off the scene. You know, he wasn't playing, but he would show up. He'd show up here at Legends and play harmonica to himself in the back corner and stuff. And when he really started to come back around, I think the album was Mercurial Sun.
Yes.
And it seems like, I don't know, I'm not a guitar player and I don't know guitar like guitar players know guitar, but a lot of times when I listen to people, I hear quotes from other people or riffs that I've heard before or similar things. But that album by Lurie seemed to be one of those albums where I don't think I'd heard anything like that before. He was one of those guys, and he's still just so terrific. And he's also one of those guys that just seems like it just comes right out of him so easily. He and his guitar are like one.
Yeah.
But Carl Weathersby, I'm a big fan of his too. And, he breaks more strings than anybody I know. He breaks a string almost every night. He has a little power screwdriver to get the string back on fast.
Yeah.
And who else was it?
Luther Allison.
Luther Allison.
Yeah.
Well, Luther Allison was, I was around for his comeback too, you know, and before he died, he came back and had a few albums for Alligator and was playing around. And his shows were so intense and so long that a lot of times there'd be, people would be leaving. They would love the show, but he's already played 2.5 hours and he's still going.
Wow.
But my favorite time seeing him was at Fitzgerald's in suburban Chicago, just barely outside of the town on Roosevelt Road. And I remember standing close enough to the stage that Luther was sweating on me. But he played so hard and just put so much into every song and every show and for so long each time that he was truly amazing and unlike anyone else in that way.